The only thing worse than being late in Sweden is being early. I think a surefire way to annoy your friends here in Sweden is to show up 15 minutes early unannounced. Ah, what a lovely review. Gaston, good on you for taking the time to write such a nice review. And I am a sucker for a good review, which honestly is why I made this channel. And I quote, "The banquet, held in the Blue Hall, is a night of elegance and prestige." I find this review a little confusing because it sounds like they were at the Nobel banquet, but I'm going to take a guess to say that they actually weren't, and maybe they're just quoting something from the actual tour itself. And honestly, I feel like we're on Facebook with all the random capitalization of words. Welcome to Managing Expectation, and today I'm going to be covering the City Hall tour here in Stockholm. I'm going to give you some information about the tour, the architect, and how City Hall has gone on to influence art in Sweden. Stadshuset, or simply City Hall in English, was opened to the public in 1923. Per usual, Stockholm City held a competition to gather designs from architects in 1902, and ultimately a guy named Ragnar Östberg won the competition and got to run with his design. But I'll go into more detail about this guy a little later in the video. The City Hall is located at Hantverkargatan 1. I think it's pretty cool that the name of the street is Hantverkargatan, and the word hantverk means handmade in Swedish. As you'll learn in the tour and even a little bit in this video, all of the materials for City Hall came from Stockholm. The cost for tickets for the show are on the screen, and you can find the schedule of the tour online or in the description below. The tour is roughly 45 minutes, and you're going to start in the Blue Room. And the Blue Room is particularly special because it's the room that the Nobel banquet is held every year here in Stockholm, which I do have another video on the Nobel Lights Week, which accompanies the Nobel Week here in Stockholm, that you can watch by following the link in the description. This room, as the name suggests, was actually meant to be painted blue. However, the architect, after seeing the color of the bricks, decided to keep it in its original color, in this case, the kind of copper red that these bricks are. You'll also learn on the tour that he actually meant for the Blue Room to not have a roof, which upon reflecting on the fantastic and predictable weather we get here in Stockholm, he decided to put a roof on it. There's also a set of steps in the Blue Room, and the architect asked his wife and her friends to put on their nicest dresses and walk up a series of stairs. And every single time they walked up and down, he would change the dimensions of the steps, maybe them being slightly wider or slightly taller. And the idea here was to actually make the perfect steps. And in this tour, you get to walk up and you get to walk down the steps at the end of the tour, and I can say they're pretty nicely designed. Our tour guide gave us the dimensions, but I can't quite remember what they were. So if you have been on this tour and you do remember the dimensions, drop a comment so you can let us all know. So bra jobbat, Ragnar. Vad duktig du är. So during this 45-minute tour, you're going to walk through several rooms. You're going to start in the Blue Room, you're going to go up the stairs, and then you're going to be taken down a long corridor, and you're ultimately going to land at the Rådssalen. And this room is for all of those that work at City Hall. And all of the individuals have been elected to their role here at City Hall, and unlike members of parliament, these individuals actually work part-time, and the vast majority of them have full-time jobs. They come to City Hall a couple times a week to meet and to work, so kudos to these people for not only having a full-time job, but taking on a really gnarly extracurricular. And much like the Blue Room, the architect here actually was going to put a ceiling over this room, but when he saw the beautiful rafters, he decided to actually not have a ceiling. So after you leave this room, you're then taken to the Prinsens galleri. And this room is super special to me because this is the room where me and my husband got married. And we're not the only ones. Dozens of couples every weekend get married in this room. But overall, it's such a pretty room. And it was really nice in this tour to have a bit more time to look around. Because if you are going to get married at City Hall, the ceremonies range between 3 to 5 minutes. So you get in the room and then you're right out of the room and another couple is coming right in. So it's quite fast. You're then taken through to an adjacent room, and one side of the room is full of windows, and the opposite side is flanked with mirrors. And the intent of this room is that wherever you're looking, you should be able to see Stockholm, which I think is fitting for City Hall. This is the only room in City Hall where the press isn't allowed, which is pretty nice because I'm sure there are folks that maybe come for the Nobel Prize that don't necessarily like the press. They have a room for themselves where they don't have any photos being taken of them, which I think is pretty nice. And you come to the last room in the tour, which is is the Golden Room. If you were to ask me before this tour if I thought that a Swede would ever cover a room in gold, I would have said you're absolutely crazy. But having gone on this tour and gone into the Golden Room, I now think that maybe they could have. The Golden Room is a collection of mosaics that tell the story of Sweden's history, and the architect Ragnar asked a friend named Einar Forsa to create the mosaics that you're seeing on the screen right now. And originally Einar asked for 4 years, but Ragnar was like, "Tva, du har till 2 år." So Einar asked for 4 years, he got 2 years. You can expect some mistakes to happen. But what I think is pretty unfortunate is that Sankt Erik, whose head is the emblem of Stockholm City, is missing his head on the mosaic here in this room, which later in this video, I'll get to why that is pretty ironic. I'm chiming in to say that if you are enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. So I mentioned that Sankt Erik is the symbol of Stockholm City. He's believed to be the protector of Stockholm, so it makes sense that his face is on the emblem. And it's recorded that his face was first used as the emblem of Stockholm City in 1376. Most of what we know of Sankt Erik happens to be written after his death, and the records are believed to be written in the second half of the 13th century, which is roughly about 100 years after he died. And Sankt Erik actually ruled over 2 kingdoms in Sweden. In the 1100s, Sweden wasn't a single kingdom like it is today. It was a collection of smaller kingdoms throughout the Scandinavian peninsula, and he ruled over 2 of those kingdoms. The first was Götaland, and the other was Svealand. And this guy loved religion, and it's said that he had 3 goals in life. The first was to build churches, the second was to bring law and order, and the third was to protect the Christian faith. And I think he delivered on at least one of those, which was building the old Domkyrka in Uppsala. And you might be wondering, Victor, why was it ironic that he didn't have a head in the mosaic in the Golden Room? Well, unfortunately for Sankt Erik, he met his maker on Ascension Day in Uppsala at his beloved cathedral by the Danish king Magnus Henriksson. It's believed that Magnus Henriksson is the reason why Sankt Erik doesn't have a head, which makes that mosaic in City Hall a little bit more ironic. And I'm sure the artist who made the mosaic felt a little silly when he realized that Sankt Erik was not going to have a head in his mosaic. But I guess that's how the mosaic crumbles, which I realize is not a very good joke. So I know I've been talking a lot about dead Swedish guys, but on this tour of City Hall, you're going to learn a lot about the architect of this building. And the architect of City Hall was born in Stockholm to a director and an actress. And he actually didn't finish his schooling. He decided to leave school early and go to work. And it wasn't until he visited the National Museum that he became interested in art. So he decided to enroll at KTH, which is a well-known university within science here in Stockholm. After enrolling in the School of Architecture, he got a scholarship. And that scholarship allowed him to travel to continental Europe. He got to go to England, France, Italy, and even Greece. And when you're walking around City Hall, you might actually see some of those influences from buildings in continental Europe at City Hall. And if you're looking at City Hall and you thought, geez, I'm surprised that building is only from 1923, according to our tour guide, that would have made Ragnar very happy because that was the architect's intent to make the building feel older than it actually was. But not only did the architect get to go around Europe, he also had a stint in America. And during that stint in America, he met another famous Swedish architect. And that architect was Isak Gustaf Claesson. And one of the buildings that Isak designed was the Nordiska Museet, which is this beautiful building here in Stockholm. But to me, this building looks like a Swedish Hogwarts. The architect for City Hall also designed another building, in this case a museum, in Gärdet, which is a neighborhood in Stockholm. And this building is where the Stockholm exhibition of 1930 was held. And it was at this Stockholm exhibition where a design concept called Swedish Grace emerged. And here's a quote from a book that my husband purchased at the Swedish Grace exhibition here in Stockholm that took place at the National Museum a few years ago. And the quote reads, "The aesthetics were characterized by an austere elegance, created through surface decoration on simply harmonious forms and smooth surfaces. Inspiration came from antiquity and prehistoric Egypt and China, as well as contemporary cultures in North Africa and South America." And this style of Swedish Grace wasn't just popular in the 1920s, it's still popular even today. There are lots of interior design stores throughout Stockholm and Sweden in general that offer pieces that are inspired by the principles of Swedish Grace, and there's even a couple in my own apartment. So do I think that this tour is worth your time? Absolutely. This is a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit of history about Sweden, but also about Stockholm. I think this tour does a really good job of focusing on Stockholm and putting City Hall into context to the other historical buildings throughout town. And if you've seen any of the reviews of this tour online, you'll know that the tour guides are excellent. And that certainly was true in my tour. The tour guide was super knowledgeable and answered my question and the questions of the other people that I was on the tour with. So I can highly recommend this tour. With that said, thank you so much for watching this episode of Managing Expectations. Don't forget to like and subscribe.